We good to go? Fantastic. Thank you all very much for joining. I know it's lunchtime, so appreciate your attention. So today we're going to talk about something which I don't think anyone's spoken about so far during the FIA 8, or maybe they have, AI. So the title of the panel is What Public Policies Would Ensure Ethical AI? So just for some context, recent studies show that over 75% of consumers are worried about AI-driven misinformation. So my idea with the panel today is to break this down into three sections. So the personal journeys of the panelists in AI, where are the current policy gaps, and finally, what kind of suggestions do these guys have to fill these gaps? So to guide us through this topic, we have three brilliant minds and me. Mm-hmm. So my name is Joe Cass. I work for S&P Global Ratings. I run our market outreach practice, which engages with investors, and I also host a monthly podcast. So before we kick off, I'm just going to ask the panelists to give a quick 1-minute intro. Arya, we'll start with you.
Hi, everybody. I am Arya Bolurfrushan, the founder and CEO of AppliedAI. We call ourselves the world's most boring AI company. It's a good claim because it can't be refuted, but also we focus on really boring tasks in highly regulated spaces that we think we can automate with AI, and we outlawed the use of the word AI in sales.
John.
My name is John Quinn. I am the founder and chairman of a law firm, Quinn, Emanuel, Urquhart, and Sullivan. I'm based in Los Angeles. Our firm has 36 offices around the world. Our largest office is in New York. Our largest office outside the US is in London. We're very proud that we have an office in Riyadh of 12 Saudi lawyers. Our practice is unique in that we only do disputes work. We only do litigation, arbitration. We're bad news. If we're on the scene, something has gone wrong. We have a very large IP patent practice, and we have paying a lot of attention to AI and emerging legal issues relating to AI.
Richard.
Hi, everyone. My name is Richard Socher. I'm the founder and CEO of U.com. U.com was the first to merge large language models like ChatGPT and others with a search index and Google-like experience to have citations, reduce hallucinations, and make this technology actually accurate. We now work with hedge funds, biotech companies, insurance companies, a lot of others to help them be more productive, automate workflows with custom agents that are actually accurate and take that last step to be useful rather than a nice prototype or demo. I also run a venture fund called AIX Ventures, has a little bit more than 400 million AUM that invests in early stage AI companies. I used to be a professor at Stanford teaching AI, the first class to train neural networks for natural language processing. Was very fortunate to have some smart students like Clément, the CEO of Hugging Face, invested at a 5 million valuation in their seed round. They're worth 4.5 billion now. The largest AI open source companies, and very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. So, as I said, I really want to start with your personal journeys and experiences that have brought you to the forefront of AI and ethics. So, Arya, I'll start with you. So, you're an ex-banker. You're a successful entrepreneur and a founder of AppliedAI. Was there a particular moment or just a project that made you realize the need for ethical AI?
Yeah, so it started around 4 years ago when I was like, I'm too young to retire, and I was kind of looking for what my highest conviction bet was. And at the time, everybody was really into Web3, and that was kind of the big focus of the market. And I came to pretty high conviction that the AI and machine learning will be the biggest change to our species for a while. So I wanted to set up a fund like Richard and start kind of investing in AI companies. And so I started looking around. And every AI company I spoke to at the time, this was 2019, 2020, was either an RPA company pretending to be an AI company, or a services company pretending to be a product company, or an academic R&D facility pretending to be a for-profit company. So I couldn't believe, I met all these people, and then eventually I got very close to Palantir, which was still a services company at the time, and I'm making an investment in them pre-IPO, and then I said, I can't believe this doesn't exist. So where is the no-frills AI company that just gives you the business results that AI promises? And the analogy was, nobody consumes hydrocarbons. Nobody consumes electricity. You consume the results that it gives you. I started AppliedAI to basically, and we named it AppliedAI to make sure we're clear and everyone's clear that the benefits of AI, what we sell as a full product. And we started in San Francisco. I convinced 3 pretty well-known engineers to leave their job and do boring things. I told them, who won electricity was the dishwasher company, and who won the internet was the bookseller, right? Like, this is where things kind of start happening. And they miraculously agreed, and then we actually moved to Abu Dhabi early on for a host of reasons that I can get into later. And now we're 140 people exporting AI from the Middle East to the US.
Perfect. Thanks, Arya. John, you're a legal legend. That's what it's been told to me. So you run the most feared law firm in the world for like years and years running. So I'm not going to say the wrong thing today.
Right.
Yeah. But nearly as impressive as that, you completed the Ironman in Hawaii twice.
Wow.
That was a few years ago.
So interested to know if you could share like a real life case or experience where you saw firsthand the importance of ethical AI in a legal system.
Well, AI has become increasingly important in our client base. We're privileged to represent public information, companies like NVIDIA, Google, Salesforce, now OpenAI. So we've had to become conversant with AI. And the one thing I'll say is there are a lot of challenging, emerging legal issues relating to AI that we don't have the answers to. I mean, there's about 20 or 30 cases that have been filed in the US that raise the question about whether using copyrighted material to train data sets is copyright infringement, or whether it's not infringement because it's fair use. We're going to have an answer to that question sooner or later. We don't have an answer to that question now.
What is your best hunch?
Huh?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your best hunch. I'm very curious.
Well, let me think. Look,
It's a big moment.
I think there's going to be a thumb on the scales in the favor of the new technology, frankly.
Yeah.
I think what happens in background, one of the tests of fair use has been, does it destroy the economic value of the underlying copyrighted work? Yeah. And I don't think training data sets in background is destroying the value of copyrighted work. The New York Times disagrees. The Financial Times disagree. Yeah. They're bringing these cases. But there are so many fascinating issues. Another is AI is inventing things all the time. It's inventing new molecules. It's inventing new industrial processes. But you know what? If there's not a substantial human involvement, you cannot patent that. You can't. So it raises the question, how do you protect the inventions made by AI? I think that's potentially a crack in the universe of IP. Because if AI can invent things a little bit, we know it's going to invent lots of things a lot. You can't patent that unless there's a human in the loop in the creation process. How do you protect the billions of dollars that are going into investments? You cannot patent general ideas. You cannot patent algorithms. You cannot patent mathematical techniques. So how are you going to protect these inventions all this money is going into? OpenAI has a grand total of 4 patents.
Wow.
Anthropic has 0 patents.
Really?
So they're relying on something else. They're relying on trade secrets law, I think, generally. So there's a host of issues I could go on, but you asked about ethics. And I think there's a lot of conversation around AI and ethics, and a lot of it takes place without sort of identifying what are the specific ethical concerns. What are we talking about? What is the definition of the ethical concerns? Like, there's discussion about use of AI in warfare and, robot soldiers. Is that ethical? There's discussion about how AI may eliminate whole swaths of people's jobs. Is that ethical? There's discussions about, are we all going to be infantilized, made more infant-like, as we rely on AI more and more to do everything? Is that ethical? So, I mean, first I think we have to define terms. There is a lot of, although we have no AI national law in the US, and my prediction is we're not anytime soon. Any of you may think we have a national privacy law in the US?
Wow.
We don't. It's GDPR rules. It's kind of, they've referred to that as the Brussels effect. I think the European AI Act is going to have kind of general application, will be another example. But about half the states have some form of a regulation of AI. And if you look at what the different states are interested in, it kind of gives you a clue about what the common ground is in terms of ethical issues. No surprise, one thing that's very much of interest in the US is the potential for biased data sets, making biased decisions, discriminatory decisions in, for example, employment. If you use an AI tool which uses a biased data set and you get biased output and decisions in who gets a job, who gets an apartment, who gets a loan, that's a concern. A lot of states have picked up on that. Even the city of New York has an ordinance that says if you want to use an AI tool in deciding who gets a job, you have to, and you technology folks will kind of giggle at, laugh at this, the regulation says that you must audit your data set once a year to show that it's unbiased. I told you talk to a data scientist about that, and that's not an easy, that's an easy thing to solve for, actually. Another thing that gets a lot of attention, again, I think common ground in terms of ethical issues, is manipulation of public opinion, deep fakes, fake news, and the like. There's a number of states that have rules and legislation relating to that. So we are seeing some experiments in what are sometimes grandly called the laboratories of democracy, meaning the states of the US. These are some of the issues that have been identified and are being addressed.
Great. Thanks, John. Richard, you're a famed serial entrepreneur, as you mentioned, ex-Stanford professor, leading-edge AI investor, and also a paramotor expert. A lot of people wondering what paramotor is. Firstly, can you explain what paramotoring is? And secondly, can you give some practical examples of how AI could be manipulated and a potential impact of unethical AI?
Happy to, yeah. So paramotoring, you have a propeller backpack, you have a paraglider over your head, and you can fly anywhere between 0 to 18,000 feet. You can fly here in the desert. It's a beautiful sport. But maybe back to the panel conversation. I think I've hired the first AI ethicist at a major company at Salesforce when I was chief scientist for 4.5 years there. And I've been working in AI since 2003 in some ways and really contributing to the technology since 2010 when I brought neural networks into the field of natural language processing, and we invented prompt engineering, a lot of other things in research. And at some point I felt like, okay, research is mostly done. We have the foundational ideas ready. We now need to just scale them and bring them to the world, and we should try to make sure that that impact that the technology has on the world is a positive one. And so when we think about AI ethics, I think the biggest problem that I see in all of ethics policies when it comes to AI is to conflate the foundational underlying technology and the applications. It does not make sense to regulate artificial intelligence, just like it doesn't make sense to regulate intelligence. It does make sense to regulate the applications of this technology. So concretely, think of AI as computers or the internet, right? When you think about regulating computers, it doesn't quite make that much sense, right? You can't say, oh, I don't like it when you share illegal content on the internet. That content might be copyrighted, could be brutal, horrific porn, whatever, like illegal stuff, right? Violence and so on. We regulate that kind of content, fortunately, totally sensibly so. We do not say, because there's illegal content on the internet, let's make the internet slower. Let's make the hard drives smaller, so that there is less illegal content possible on, shared on a website or on someone's hard drive. And just like that, it doesn't make sense to regulate AI in the abstract and say, oh, there are too many parameters in this model. And it's one of the fortunate reasons why Governor Newsom in California vetoed the AI regulation law, because it said, oh, if your model has more than this number of parameters, then it needs to be regulated. That type of regulation makes no sense when it comes to AI, because you can have very simple, benevolent, large parameter models, and you can have very small models that are extremely crucial for people's lives, like in self-driving cars. I don't want my self-driving car to be not regulated, right? I don't want some random startup to just drive 100 miles an hour with me on the highway. I don't want my AI surgeon to try out things in my brain before having proper FDA approval for that, and so on. So when you get to real applications, then we need to regulate AI, and often there are actual institutions in most countries, like the transportation authorities or the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, that do regulate those applications, and we need to empower those institutions to understand AI and then help companies get through regulations to get their products into market. I think that's one of the most important points of ethics policies in AI.
John?
It was very interesting that California law, which was simmering in the assembly in Sacramento for a long, long time. There was a lot of hearing and a lot of effort that went into that. And it was all, and actually the community, the AI community, was divided on it. I think OpenAI supported it, Anthropic was opposed to it, Elon Musk supported it with reservations. A lot of effort went into it, but ultimately the governor vetoed it, decided not to sign it. So we are still back to the starting point in regulation in California.
That's right. I think part of the problem for AI regulation is that AI is such an omni-use technology, not just dual use, it's omni-use, right? You can add an AI, the same computer vision algorithm in the abstract can be trained to classify intracranial hemorrhage in brain scans and save people's lives, but you can train that same convolutional neural network and connect it to a machine gun and say, shoot, not shoot, right? So it's all about the training data, what you do with it, right? So it makes even less sense to regulate the abstract algorithms that can be trained to solve all kinds of different tasks. And you need to indeed look at the real applications. I think the second biggest problem is that we often conflate science with science fiction for the future in AI, right? Concretely, you have AI applications right now that have problems that you already brought up, bias and so on, but then you have the sci-fi problems of the AI will become conscious, self-aware, so intelligent that it will choose what it wants to do itself, and maybe it chooses to wipe out all of humanity, and then look at all the sci-fi movies, the Terminator and so on, and then we have to all be really, really scared of existential risk and loss of control. That is fun sci-fi. I'd probably watch those movies too, but it's science fiction, and it's very distracting from real problems that we have right now.
Arya, anything to comment on this?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts here, and I promise we didn't plan this before. I think we shared a similar view, and often when we speak to folks in government is you don't regulate the tool. Like, you don't regulate scissors, right? They could be used for a murder weapon or for saving lives. It's the kind of intent and the use of it. So the application is important, but also I think the human kind of in the loop is a big part of it. We spend a lot of time thinking about the future of knowledge work and kind of where humans will reside in this future. There's 1 billion knowledge workers in the world who are doing a lot of our, we call them high cost of error use cases, surgery, but healthcare, insurance, etc. And where we've come to is we think the human will reside in 2 places. One is the kind of intent, the will, which is the prime mover, the kind of what you want to do with it, and that is actually very spiritual and philosophical. It's like the human spark, the divine spark. How many kind of human ideas have died on the vine of admin and friction in our species' history, right? So think about the massive kind of wellhead of production of things that will materialize. But that intent needs to be kind of, in law, in legal terms, I think it's a guilty mind.
Mm-hmm. Mens rea.
Mens rea, where it's like, what is that intent of that person? I think that's one place. The barbell kind of other part of the human involvement, which is in the workflow of serious work, is, we call it oversight, the cost of audit, where, and again, this is, I'm happy you're here, John, is what we're seeing is a lot of folks that use workflows need to assign the liability somewhere. Some human needs to sign this healthcare claim form, so in case something goes wrong, who do you sue? It can't be the machine. So the human will require and exact the price to sign something and assume the liability of that job. The same way Tesla or someone's in the car, do you sue the coder? So we think these two places is where humans long-term will kind of be involved. And, and that's where I think we can regulate without stopping the innovation. I really highly advise against over-regulating in this key part, because there's a lot of game theory on how fast these things go, and any kind of friction you add to innovation will hamper any country and any company's growth.
Yeah, I think you bring up a very important point in terms of accountability.
Yeah.
I think society, consumers will expect there is accountability. We've had incidents already with autonomous driving. Yeah. I think in 2018, a Waymo car didn't recognize a pedestrian, struck and killed a pedestrian in New Mexico. There was a driver. She was there on her phone. She wasn't paying attention, so didn't intervene, and someone was killed. Yeah. Who's responsible? The state of New Mexico charged her with involuntary manslaughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the time has come that really we need to have products liability theories that apply to AI. And maybe that's going to mean that folks like you are going to be held accountable for your products, how they're deployed, how they are used. That's true under the European AI Act. If you build a large language model, you build an AI, you bring it to the marketplace, you're actually going to be required to keep track of the downstream uses, and in some cases will be held responsible, even strictly liable, without a showing of negligence for the outcome. I don't know if you think that's good or bad.
I was just going to say for my next question, it was going to be to
maybe
both Arya and Richard. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, this accountability aspect from both kind of founders and CEOs?
I advise the German and the French government sometimes, and I'm a little bit worried that Europe is very well set up to protect people from the downsides of AI, but it's unfortunately so over-regulating a very fledgling industry that it's not very good at getting the upsides of AI. Whereas the US is the opposite. Very little regulation. It's just there's sort of this on the spectrum of litigation versus legislation, right? The US wants to just say, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and if someone gets hurt, they'll sue, and then we have a law. That setup improves innovation, right? It allows for innovation to happen, whereas in the in Europe, a lot of times the European Commission would prefer to protect people from any downsides before they even get hurt. And so they try to regulate before and legislate before anyone gets hurt, and that unfortunately doesn't help with innovation.
So you think people should get hurt first, and then we'll decide?
You're the U.S. lawyer. You're the U.S. lawyer. That's just. I'm just saying that's the U.S. setup.
I think I'm not sure the audience is how familiar they are with this, but what is AI like from an enforcement perspective? Okay, let's say you get regulated. Let's say there's all these laws, and let's say now you have to comply by them. What is it? It's basically a text file with some numbers in it. It's just a bunch of weights, right, and a big thing. So how are you going to enforce it? This weight's incorrect. Go and what was the training data? It's very hard to prove the provenance of what was trained, first of all. Second of all, even when the weights and the training is complete and you're in the inference layer, how do you actually go around and enforce it as a government? So I think when we think about the regulation factor, the enforceability is another huge concept of, do you wait till something goes wrong and then kind of investigate where it went wrong? Or, it's just a text file.
It's a text file, but if somebody does get hurt, I mean, traditionally under products liability law, somebody gets hurt, you have to prove the product was defective. Now there's a question about, is the AI, is the text file a product
The weight incorrect.
I think the law is going to evolve, and decide that this text file is a product. But the challenge is, if somebody gets hurt, do they have to prove that it was defective? You can prove causation. Yeah, we got hurt because of this.
Interesting.
But does it make sense to talk in terms of whether a text file is defective?
No.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
If it didn't recognize, the car didn't recognize that this was a pedestrian, but this was deployed. Is it unfair to hold the deployer accountable for that?
And is there is intentionality a factor in
No,
liability?
not in products liability law. There's no intent. So negligence.
Negligence,
By
yeah.
definition,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't recall negligent intent.
yeah.
You created something that's defective. It hurts somebody.
Fascinating.
Yep.
If it's defective.
Yeah.
But you got to tell me what that looks like. You have to define defective.
Well,
There's a really interesting philosophical question here too, which is, let's say self-driving cars, right? What if at some point in the future we can show that currently there are, say, 10,000 dead people every year in a specific region from people driving cars,
Yeah.
and self-driving cars could reduce that by 90% and say there's only 1,000 dead people now from cars, but now there are 3 to 5 companies that are responsible for either saving 9,000 lives or murdering 1,000
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Where does humanity want to go in that? And that is a hard philosophical question.
Yeah,
'cause
tell
it's
that
really
to
making
the
world better.
family of the
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly,
Like now it's my
exactly.
daughter
Yeah.
that died in a car accident. Like
Exactly.
I don't care that humanity was better off
Yeah.
overall. I'm going to
But
try to sue, and I'm really sad.
This is a big point, because what is the baseline? So even when we're deploying these AI models into these companies, once in a while, let's say it's not 100% accurate, but it's 50% more accurate than a human,
Yep.
right? So is it an unfair benchmark to assume a perfect product? Like, what are the kind of liabilities you have in
I
regular?
think the bar for AI is actually higher than it is for human intelligence.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think, so we've spoken about you guys, that was great, by the way, your kind of personal experiences, the challenges. Just wanted to, we've got kind of 10-ish minutes left. Wanted to talk a bit about solutions, how we could work kind of to collaborate with government and regulators to ensure that, ethics, AI ethics frameworks are put in place effectively, I guess. So, John, what lessons could we learn from previous legal battles that could create kind of a forward roadmap for collaboration between tech and government to achieve some semblance of a solution?
I think a lot of the conversation about AI and technology and ethics is in terms of, you first start talking about the AI and the tech, and then, okay, what ethical issues does that raise? I think it's kind of useful to think about it the other way around. Think about what are the ethical issues that we're concerned about, whether it's accountability, whether it's bias, whether it's deep fakes and manipulation and the like. And then to look at the technology, how can the technology help us solve those problems? Because I'm sure people like you can come up with ways to, and we know there's products out there now, to detect fake information, inauthentic information. I mean, it's going to be a constant battle, right? It's a spy versus spy situation. But there are technological solutions to that. I'm sure also there are ways, if you can identify bias, to use data science to wash that out or to correct for it over time. So I think what we should be thinking about, how can we use the tech to address the ethical problems?
And Arya, how do you think tech companies should work with government to create these ethical standards?
So the view that I think is forming within us is you either regulate the input or the output, which is where the humans. I think we're obviously a species of humans who are building an economy and laws to regulate ourselves. So I think a potential solution could be attaching a human name for every output and requiring that the same way, like we had corporations that were like entities. But now you have to attach a corporation to a human. There needs to be a UBO. There needs to be somebody who shows up in court at some point. So really figuring out how to attach the product, the output, whether it's a file, it's a folder in an insurance claim or tax filing or audited accounts or whatever that is, to have a human signature. And that will force a lot of the companies that are in tech to, one, figure out the provenance and quality control and literally assuming the liability as a feature. And two, I think will create a massive amount of jobs for the future of this symbiosis between human and AI. Our productivity will increase. So, for example, one human produces 30 files a day. It will go to 30,000, but still, one person will go through the edge cases and make a judgment call and a decision on these files. That's what we believe.
Thanks.
So I think you brought up a good point, which is mis and disinformation. It's actually a really tricky one. At U.com, we work a lot on actually making this technology more accurate, right? And we have citations for all the facts that the LLM would give you, and that's really important. But at a high level, one person's misinformation is another person's freedom of speech. And it becomes a very tough philosophical question that different civilizations have answered differently for how they think about freedom of speech. The US has an extremely broad definition of freedom of speech that does include lying. It is legal to lie in the United States. It is not legal to do that in Germany. There are certain things where you will get fined. If you say the Holocaust didn't happen in Germany, you will get fined, right? And different countries and groups and civilizations have decided that question differently, and that seeps into the field of artificial intelligence and trying to regulate that. I think zooming out, there are basically three threat vectors of AI. There is the loss of control, the self-conscious, whatever, self-aware AI, like, I think that's a red herring. Then there's intended bad uses, military, trying to kill people. I think absolutely we have to very highly regulate it, have extremely high standards, and the standards probably have to be higher than human standards in many cases. And we ideally have agreements internationally also on how we deal with AI that actually makes kill or no kill kinds of decisions, and I hope we can avoid that for as long as possible. But my hunch is it will happen in the future. And then there's sort of the unintended bad uses of AI. You try to have an AI that helps you in the legal system, but now bias seeps in. You have AI that helps in the banking system, but now bias seeps in. There are not enough women in the past who applied for like a company loan. So AI thinks, oh, well, women shouldn't get the loan because it hasn't happened in the past so much. So you need to regulate highly all of those industries where AI affects real people's lives, and you need to empower the institutions that work in those industries from each government to understand how and why bias could seep into a particular area. And the bigger the decision and impact is on people, the more we need to regulate it. So banking, very much, even more so in the legal profession, where I might rate recommendations in the future for sentencing and things like that. I hope those will always be checked by humans afterwards, but even the recommendation could bias you in one way or another, and we need to verify that the inputs that are being given, and you can in some ways test it. No matter how inscrutable a neural network or an AI model is, you can test it by saying, here's an input, now make that person of a different gender or different ethnicity or something, and see if that output changes. And if the output shouldn't change, then you can verify that. And so there are many places where we can actually test for a variety of different biases that could seep into these models, and where we do need to regulate it.
Great. Arya?
Yeah, I think this is very interesting, and I think we're speaking about ethics here, and I think ethics is also a function of our timeline, and I think we're lucky enough to have some kind of case studies of revolutionary tech in the past. It's I forgot who it was who said that productivity is nothing in the short term, but everything in the long term, and if you look at kind of human productivity over time. Past hundreds of thousands of years, it was pretty flat, and then literally the past 100 years, there was a vertical kind of jump. And that was hydrocarbons, which was found around these parts, that fueled the human progress over the past 100 years that have led us here. Now, that whole revolution had a lot of lessons for us. And I think one of the ones that we should take from it is we really alienated labor. And there was the whole with massive wars were fought over how we're going to regulate ourselves in this between capital and labor on who accretes the benefits of this automation. And there are people who had very strong views on where the surplus profit of automation goes to, whether it's the bourgeoisie or the or labor, and if we're not careful in the regulation around this stuff, we need to make sure labor accrues some of the benefits of these massive productivity gains, because at the end of the day, the ethics of this is we should not be infantilized. I think is a great word to use, and the machines should work for us, and it shouldn't be just they accrue all the benefits, and whoever owns the capital or shares in these companies ends up with all the upside. So the human in the loop, I think, from an ethics perspective, from a liability perspective, from a high cost of error perspective, is a core part of the future solution.
Fantastic. Listen, thank you guys so much. We've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to actually offer you guys in the audience a chance to ask a question. So if you raise your hand, hopefully one of these guys could come with, how about you, sir?
Oh, the microphone's not on. All right, we need another microphone. Maybe while we wait for the microphone, I'll throw in, I think long term, I'm extremely optimistic, because when you look at history, 150 years ago, over 90% of people worked in agriculture. If you had told them that there's going to be a big machine, and if you stand in its way, it's going to crush you, and by the way, it's going to take 90% of all your jobs, people would be like, oh, let's not innovate in that direction, right? What else are we going to do? We need food mostly, right? That's what 90% of us are working on. And now only 5% of people work in agriculture, and I'm pretty sure the majority of people are happy that they don't have to work manually in the field. But throughout that history, like you said, there were Luddites who said, oh, we don't want these weaving machines because weaving is our job. And now we all appreciate that we have cheaper clothing and so on. And so I do think short term, I am a little bit worried, and we do need to have more social systems and educational systems and that's, I think, one of the biggest part of the ethics of AI is to help people reskill, give them some time and buffer to actually adjust to this new world and new educational opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. Sir.
Thank you. You actually mentioned when you were speaking about the correlation between freedom of information, or freedom of speech and information. Of course, these are two different things, because information is actual, what happened, real information. And freedom of speech is more or less an opinion or some deductions. So I'm not too worried about that overlapping. And if AI was provided all the information and all the books of all the countries in the world, it'll probably come up with a balanced information set and not... The other thing is, when you say about the bad uses of AI, we've always worried about the misuse of technology. And that became very apparent when the internet came in, from, pornography to all kinds of things that you can do on the internet and get away with. But, the world is still here. At the end of the day, what can AI do in the form of, you mentioned we have to control how it is used in making weapons or in wars. And I don't think, let's be honest. We are today witnessing a form of ethnic cleansing right in front of our eyes happening in the Middle East. And it goes on, not because of AI, but because government and certain people in power who can stop it are not, and maybe perpetuating it by supporting the aggressor. So at the end of the day, AI is technology, but what happens to us and what happens to the world are basically decisions that people take. And this is what we have to recognize, that we will always have better ways to do things, better technology, quicker ways to make decisions. But who's making these decisions, and what we as human beings decide to use this technology for? There's always, people like Miyoshi-san yesterday was saying that 1% of people are bad and 99% are good. And yeah, that's probably true. So I think AI is an exciting thing. I think it could make our lives better. It can do, it can help us cure cancers that we need years to understand and to tackle, to handle. But with it, like you said, the ability to do a lot of bad things in this world. And
Yep.
it's not technology, it's human beings, it's the decisions we make, it's what we see in front of us, and we can decide to stop it or not. We cannot blame AI, we cannot blame technology, we cannot blame our ability to do things better and faster.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, well, can you make it quick? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Mine is a just straightforward question. First, maybe Socher can answer, or any of the panelists. Can AI replace human? Number one, how accuracy AI brings in when it comes to data and analytics? This is the two questions. Thank you.
Oh boy, that will take a while
you can
to
take that.
answer in its full complexity. AI can obviously not replace humans in a lot of different ways, right? Like I want to have a wife, I want to have children. AI is not going to give me children. There are many ways AIs cannot and will not replace humans on different levels. At the same time, there are a lot of boring, repetitive jobs that at some point tractors automated many of those jobs, machines, physical machines, and now there are a lot of boring, repetitive things that people do that probably AI will be able to do. So the answer is a bit of a cop-out. It's complicated. In some cases, AI can replace certain kinds of human labors, just like other types of automation have replaced certain kinds of human labor before.
Perfect. I think we're at time, but appreciate your question. Listen, Richard, John, Arya, thank you so much. I'd like everyone to join me in giving these guys a round of applause for a great time.
Thank you for
Thank you.
great moderation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.